This video will demonstrate how to properly configure the Leviton email notifier, part number 20A30-1 using PC Access software. As always, the first thing we're going to do is open the PC Access software, and we're going to open up the file that we're using, in this case email_video. Once the software is open in the file, first thing you want to do is confirm that your controller is running firmware version 3.13 or later. Here you can see we are running 3.14a, so we're good. If you don't have firmware version 3.13 or later, you must first update the firmware in the automation controller before you can proceed. Next, notice in your setup tree that there are no visible settings for email notifier, and that's because we have not enabled it yet. So to enable it, we're going to go under Expansion, Serial, and we're going to set the serial function for the email notifier for the port that we're using. In this case, we have ours connected to serial port 4. So we're going to click on the drop-down menu and we're going to select Email Board. Now, for the purpose of demonstration, I'm going to click on serial 4, and you'll notice that it automatically popped up settings for email notification. So next we want to click on the email notification board. You'll notice in your work area that there are several fields. The first one is the email from address. And by default it has no reply at mydomain.com. You can enter in an email address if you please, or you can leave it as it is, but you cannot delete it. If you delete it and try to navigate away, you're going to get an error because there's no email address formatted properly. So in this case, I'm going to use the an email account that I know the email address to. Next is the Smtp Server. We're going to click on Smtp Server, and you'll notice that it opens up a dialog box. The two most commonly used email interfaces are Gmail and Yahoo. If you're going to be using one of these two, simply highlight it and click on OK. Because as you see, when you click on Gmail, it automatically populates the name, the address, and the port, as well as requires authentication and requires SSL. Once you click on OK, you'll notice the Smtp server address and port number are already input. Only thing you need to do is enter in the username and the SMTP password. You'll notice as you type in the password that it's displayed. This is so that you can visibly view it, and then once you navigate away from it, click on another field, it just becomes an asterisk. Another field that you'll find in here is a new feature that we've added onto the email notifier to work with your automation controller. It's called Enable Time Sync. By default it's set to no, but if you'll set it to yes, the controller's time will constantly be synced to the national time. And you also have a button that you can use to sync time now, and you can use this when you're online. The next thing we're going to do is go to the email to addresses. Here you'll notice that you have three major columns: the name, the email address, and then a column with a bunch of tick boxes for ARM, disarm, alarms, trouble, system, access control, and user message. In the name field, you can type a user-friendly name for the email address you're going to be using. In this case, I'm going to enter in work. For email address, I'm going to enter in my work email address. Next, you can set up what types of events that you want to be automatically notified. You may want to be notified in case of any arming or disarming of the system, any alarms, any troubles, any system events, access control if you're using it, or user message. You have 6 that are configurable, and simply by checking them or unchecking them. In this case, I'm going to check ARM and disarm and alarms. notice that you can have up to 8 total email addresses, so you could have different ones and set for different items. You'll also notice that you have an email messages, and this goes from 1 all the way down to 100. These are customized messages that you can use in programming. As an example, let's say you had something like a wine cellar and you had a sensor on the door and you wanted to be notified anytime the door was open. Well, you might want to name one of these messages wine cellar door open. And then you could create a line of programming by clicking on the automation tab, clicking on the green plus sign to add an automation block, and then create a block of programming. Clicking on trigger and selecting zone. And we're looking for wine cellar door. And we want to know when it's not ready or open. And then clicking on OK. And then clicking on action. And we want to select email message. And of course, since we only have one entered, it's already selected. And of course, the wine defaults to the first message, which is wine cellar door open. We click on OK. And if we click on OK again, it says when wine cellar door not ready, then email message number 1, wine cellar door open to esiever@leviton.com. And this is my work email address. Now, once you finish configuring all the settings that you want to use for your email notifier, the next thing that we want to do is write this configuration to the controller. So we want to connect to the controller, so we click on Communications Connect Network. And then once we're online, as evidenced by the online indication, we go to Communications, Write to Controller. Now, we created programs, so we want that checked. We didn't add any names, we didn't add any voices, we didn't add any extended setup. And then we have the email board setup. And if you'll notice in parentheses, it says we'll also write the controller setup. So we can uncheck this box. But we did add programs and we're writing the configuration for the email board setup. We click on OK, and this is going to write the information into your automation controller. This process can take anywhere from 15 seconds to maybe 2 or 3 minutes, depending on the size of your file and the amount of information that you're writing. You'll notice it's already written the setup, it's clearing the programs, and it's going to write our single program. Now it's erasing the setup of the email board, writing the setup, and now it's done. Once it's complete, the last thing that you're going to want to do is test. And I'm going to give you a couple of tips. The first one is simply send text message. If you click on this field, you'll notice it opens up your write dialog, and basically it rewrites just the configuration for the email server and the defaults to email message, the action type. It already has my work email selected, and the message is the only one I have, so I'm going to click on OK. And this is sent if it's configured properly. And notice here we get an email message from horace.lev@gmail.com, wine cellar door open. Another way that you can test, if you remember, we had put an email address and we had checked arm and disarm and alarms. Now, I'm not going to put my system into an alarm, but I can send a command to change the security to away. And you may notice in the background that my system is beginning to beep because it's arming. And I should momentarily pop up another email message stating that my security was armed. It's a good practice once you've done all of your configurations to go ahead and test all of the various states. In this way, it guarantees or provides proof that it is configured. And here you see we got the second email. Once you're finished testing, remember to save the contents of your file, and now you can close your file. And that concludes this demonstration.